Just mop and stay quiet. That's what he said, without even looking at me, flicking his wrist like he was shooing a fly. And in that second, I felt myself shrink into the floor. Not a person, just background. I was holding a mop at the edge of the East Salon in Russell Blake's Canyon Mansion uniform, crisp hair pinned back, the perfect silhouette of hired help. And right then, the interpreter collapsed, chair scraping, laptop, skidding papers, floating down like feathers, the room going still the way a room does when money suddenly smells trouble. Delegates from Tokyo, Berlin, and Riyadh were already half out of their seats, a billion-dollar deal dangling by a thread, and the only thing louder than the sirens down the hill was the disrespect hanging in the air like smoke. I had been taught to survive bullets and insults the same way. Breathe, don't show the flinch, find the words that keep the worst from happening. So I stepped forward, not brave, just done being invisible, and said, "Mr. Blake, I can help just until..." He laughed, sharp and small. "You can help by cleaning. You're a maid with a mop, not an interpreter." A junior staffer chuckled. Someone muttered in formal Arabic that we were unprepared and disrespectful. The German delegate closed her folder, and I heard the deal start to die in the kind of silence that comes before a door slams. I turned toward the Saudi partner and spoke in classical Arabic. "Honored sir, forgive the confusion. The delay is misfortune, not disrespect. Give us a few minutes, and I will interpret with the care your fathers deserve." And he froze mid-step, then answered in the old court phrases I hadn't used since Cairo. I matched his cadence, inclined my head, and watched his briefcase settle back to the carpet like a decision landing. "What did you just say?" Russell whispered finally, looking at me, and I told him plainly I asked him to stay. He agreed. Then I walked to the table, gathered the fallen interpreter's notes, and shifted into German to clarify the data. Sovereignty clause moved to Japanese to smooth a phrasing that would have sounded like a threat if we weren't careful, back to English to stitch the room together, tone by tone, breath by breath. People think interpreting is swapping words, but it's temperature. It's knowing when a joke is an apology, when an apology is a warning. It's catching the shape of a hand and the silence after a sentence. It's hearing where pride lives and finding the exit ramp before it crashes. So I did the job I used to do under UN flags, quietly and with my whole chest, and the room that had been breaking apart began to breathe again. By mid-afternoon, the partners had a preliminary agreement, not love, just consensus, the kind that pays bills and stops bleeding stock. Someone made a joke that I softened into a laugh, so it didn't set anything on fire. The paramedics took the interpreter out, and the salon felt like a place where disaster had walked past and missed us by inches. Russell kept staring at me like I'd grown a second head, then he said under his breath, "Where did you learn to do that?" And I said Geneva 3 years before. A doctored transcript made me radioactive before every agency decided I was a liability, before I learned the difference between being quiet and being erased. He nodded once, jaw tight, and later in his study, glass steel, the kind of expensive quiet that steals your voice if you let it. He slid an NDA across the desk and said, "PR is going to spin, we'll control this." And I looked at the paper, then at him and asked, "Control my story or your image, because those are not the same." And he held my gaze, then tore the NDA in half and let it drop into the trash. Not a speech, not a performance. Just paper falling like a small decision that might be the start of a real one. By sunrise, the story leaked anyway. A Berlin blog, then a wire service, then American headlines that love a hook more than a human. The maid who spoke 9 languages. And my cracked phone lit up like it had a heartbeat. Yeah, that happened. And while the internet argued between miracle and fluke, my inbox pinged with a quiet email from Daniel, my former team lead in Geneva. I know you didn't fail. I was pressured to keep quiet. I'm ready to testify, and I sat on the edge of my small room above the garage, hands shaking, not with fear, with the feeling of a door I thought was welded shut, creaking open. Russell wasn't an instant saint. Power almost never is. But he did the next right thing, and the next he had legal pull every document they could find. He reviewed camera footage and heard me switch from Arabic to German to Japanese without dropping a stitch. He admitted he'd underestimated me and hated the taste of those words, but said them anyway, and when we got on a call with the Berlin affiliate 2 days later and saw Martin Kovac, the consultant who had quietly lined up the clauses that gutted my career, hovering off camera like a ghost with a tailor, Russell cut him off and terminated his access on the spot. No gavel, no music, just a clean click that felt like a hallway finally lit. The twist, if you need one for the middle of the story, wasn't that I could speak 9 languages. It was that the men who had told me to mop realized I'd been carrying the room they thought they owned, and that my silence all these years wasn't ignorance, it was exile, you know what I mean? The kind that keeps your rent paid and your soul on layaway. So when the apology came from the board, it wasn't flowery. It named what happened and started repairing what could be repaired. And when Russell told me he had burned the NDA and reached out to the UN quietly to reopen the Geneva file, my breath left my chest like a knot undone. I didn't want a better chair at their table. I wanted a door. So while PR folks pitched me redemption arcs, I didn't want. I started something small and stubborn called 9 Voices, an initiative to train and protect interpreters from overlooked communities, to certify talent without making them mortgage their lives, to teach ethics as muscle memory, to give people who keep the world from exploding a place to breathe after they carry everyone else's grief in their throats. We built a whisper room in our first exhibit, where visitors heard layered confessions from those who translate war and policy into sentences that fit on one page. We logged context as evidence. We wrote a simple rule: no unsigned memos rewrite a life. And we piloted new protections in courts that had been chewing people up for sport. The satisfying part isn't cinematic, it's precise. A tribunal used our protocol. A Sudanese mother told her story in her dialect and was understood as she lived it. Not as it was misheard, a committee in Geneva ratified a framework that guarantees interpreters representation and debriefs. A tech company adopted language equity as actual policy instead of poster talk. Russell stepped back from the center of the shot on purpose and put budget where his mouth should have been, and I went back to rooms that once swallowed me whole and spoke without asking permission. Not loud, just steady, like someone who finally knows the room can't run without her. Do I forgive everyone? No, I don't forgive systems. I change them or I starve them of my labor. And every day I relearn the difference between fury and fuel, between a clean apology and choreography, between being useful and being used. But when I tell you I stood at the back of the chamber and watched the vote blink green, protections adopted unanimous, I won't lie, something in me unclenched that I had been clenching since the day a forged page tried to rename me. And I walked out before cameras could ask me to perform the moment I went outside. Let the canyon air hit my face and whispered to nobody and everybody. I was not erased, I was translated against my will, and I took my language back. So tell me what you think. Was Russell's change accountability or optics? Do institutions deserve second chances or just spotlights? Until they act right, have you ever watched someone be underestimated and then watched the room bend when they finally spoke? Drop your city and your first language. In the comments, share a time you were told to stay quiet and didn't. And if this hit you anywhere real, like, subscribe, send it to that one loud room that still thinks silence is neutral. I'll be in the thread, listening.